Good morning. Good morning. Yeah, I have this in my hand and you know why. Yep, turn them off, please. Thank you. And I'll do the same. All right, this morning, I'm Claire Colton. This morning, I have the privilege of introducing my favorite animal keepers, Hillary Colton, my daughter, and Ish Ghanem, my son-in-law. We're going to tell you a lot about the zoo. Let me tell you a little bit about them first. When Hillary was a toddler, she asked Santa for a toy airplane. And my late husband and I thought perhaps she'd be a pilot. But the next Christmas, she asked for a hippopotamus, a toy. And the Christmas after that, it was a ring-tailed lemur. And we started to see a pattern. We went to the zoo often. She started reading in 3rd grade about Charles Darwin, and we saw more of the pattern. And when she was 9, we sent her to the zoo's sleepaway camp in Front Royal. She went many, many times. When we went to family night, family visit, Hillary had a snake, not a poisonous snake, just a nice, gentle snake, wrapped around her neck like a scarf. And that was the beginning. Ish didn't start as early as Hillary with his interest in animals. When he was in college, he participated in some research about bats, and that was the beginning for him. He got interested in zoos, visited them often, and started to think about a profession. So both of them graduated from Christopher Newport University with degrees in biology. Hillary went on to get a master's degree in international animal welfare, ethics, and law from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland. Ish has been working several places. He was at the Memphis Zoo in Tennessee for a number of years. Then he came back to this area and was at the Smithsonian's Conservation and Biology Institute in Front Royal. And then he moved to the downtown campus where he is on the Big Cats and Bears team. Hillary was working initially at the bird house at the National Zoo. She was on Asia Trail, and now she is at Amazonia, which is the rainforest exhibit. And now, let's get to the animals.
All right, thank you guys so much for coming this morning. The title of our talk is Conservation and Care of Zoo Animals, so I'm going to quickly go through some of the science background into what we do, but I promise there will be cute animal photos and videos further on in the presentation. So the Smithsonian Institution is the world's largest research institution. We have 19 facilities as well as additional research sites that are not visible to the public. I identified 5 of them here. The Environmental Research Center in Maryland, our Migratory Bird Center is based out of DC. The Conservation Biology Institute, you all will hear more about. And then we also have research stations in Panama, as well as the Coral Cryopreservation Clinic that is in Oahu, Hawaii. And those are the ones that Ish and I work with predominantly. The main campus is what most people are familiar with. That exhibits 12 different places that the public can visit, as well as our Wildlife Health Science Center for our veterinary and pathology teams, that Migratory Bird Center that I mentioned, as well as our genomics and our elephant herpes virus laboratory. Front Royal, Virginia is where the zoo's sister campus is for our Conservation Biology Institute. It's 3,900 acres on the Appalachian Trail. It houses the Center for Conservation and Sustainability, which looks at global populations, the Conservation Ecology Center, which discusses human impact into wild populations around the Earth, as well as habitat loss, our Great Plains Science Center, which focuses on the American grasslands, the species housed within there, and then our Global Health Division partners with, if anyone here is a doctor, the One Health programs that include things like zoonotics, or indicators of wild populations that might impact human health later on. There are formal partnerships with George Mason University as well as Virginia Working Landscapes. This campus is not open to the public typically, but we did just celebrate, what was it, our 50th anniversary? The 50th anniversary of that campus was this year. When we talk about species conservation, most people are familiar with endangered, threatened, things like that. That's a classification that's defined by a group called the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Now, when we talk about species diversity, here you can see the vertebrates, but if we talk about animals as a whole, there are 2 million extant species of animals. Most of them don't have backbones. And of those 2 million species, only about 10% of them have been classified by the IUCN. So when you hear us talking about endangered species, please just remember there are significant orders of magnitude more that have not been examined because we don't know what their wild populations might be. So when zoos talk about conservation, we're talking about typically whole ecosystems that might have some of these species within. Within zoos, we might be breeding animals for the sake of having what we call ARCs. We're keeping a captive population separate from the wild. Species survival programs are between zoos in managing captive populations of certain species. There are over 300 programs within the United States zoos, and they are looking at the captive genetic diversity. We're learning things about how long those animals might live under human care and what species-specific considerations we might have. These are 2 white-blotched river rays that were bred at a facility and then went to another aquarium to live out the rest of their life. But we also have species that we might be breeding for release into the wild. And these are animals that will be reared typically quite differently than what we might see in zoos. The animals for zoos are going to be seen by you all visiting. They might have more significant animal-human interactions with training programs or things like that. But for the animals that we're going to release into the wild, we'll be a little bit more hands-off. And for some species, that might not matter. So the American burying beetle, which is this one right here, they don't care if we're in the room with them. They're fine. That's America's largest carrion beetle. They're being reintroduced out into the Great Plains. Another species that doesn't care is the sunflower sea star. They are found in the Pacific Northwest waters. The aquariums in that space will actually collect the spawn, so the sperm and the eggs from captive sea stars, and then they'll just go dump them out in the ocean and be like, great, have some genetic diversity, you guys are fine. But for ones that we are releasing out into the wild, like this sea heck kingfisher, the keepers are going to have pretty minimal interactions with them. That particular species is quite successful. They're native to Guam, where of the 11 endemic bird species, 9 of them are now extinct. So that breeding effort of those offspring, every 5 years or so, zoos around the country will actually get that offspring, and we take them to an island called Rota, which is nearby, because the snakes are still in Guam, but that island in particular does not have that predator. So that's a massive undertaking that happens about twice a decade with all of the breeds. The most famous species, or possibly the most successful that the zoo has been involved in, Ish is going to talk to you guys about.
Oh, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, great. I love participation, so feel free to let me know. So one of our most famous ones is our black-footed ferrets. These guys were from mainly the Midwest U.S., basically out in like Montana, those kind of states over there. And they actually got to a point where they were extinct in the wild, or at least we thought so. Not even extinct in the wild, extinct entirely. We thought they were all gone. The main issue out there was that the farmers like to have their farms and have everything growing on the farms there. Excuse me. And they had issues with prairie dogs. Turns out farmers don't like it when prairie dogs eat their crops. Who knew? And so one of the main ways that they were using to deal with this was to poison the prairie dogs. But unfortunately, prairie dogs are the main food source for black-footed ferrets. So they were killing off this black-footed ferret population without even realizing it. Another odd thing that black-footed ferrets can get that we didn't quite know until a little bit later is the Black Plague. They can be killed by that, and so even in areas where we're not worried about the prairie dogs being poisoned anymore, because we're not poisoning them anymore, we do have to worry about them getting the plague and dying from that. And so we actually got really lucky in that back in the 80s, there was a farmer's dog that killed something and brought it home. And when he saw it, he was like, this is weird, but my dog kills animals all the time. I don't really care. But his wife looked at it and said, that looks weird. That's not a normal one. I'm going to look into this a bit more. And so she found it out. It was a black-footed ferret. And she was like, these aren't supposed to exist anymore. What is going on with this thing here? So fortunately for us, she actually got in contact with their local wildlife people and told them about where it was and all that kind of stuff. And they found the last wild colony of black-footed ferrets. There were about 118 individuals in that. And so our people went out and caught as many as they could. I think they caught about 18 of them. Of those 18, they were able to take them back and start breeding with 11 of them. The other ones, they basically weren't able to breed them, but they did get their genetic information banked, sperm, eggs, things like that. And so for that, the rest of the colony, unfortunately, did get Black Plague and died off out in the wild. So they were completely extinct in the wild, gone. So we started breeding them in captivity, especially at our facility out in Front Royal. We are been great at breeding these things. We've just been churning them out, and we are now reintroducing them in the wild, and they're doing very well. We have actually done so well that basically, as anyone who knows much about genetics, population of 11 mammals is not much to go on, but they've been doing okay. But we were actually recently able to expand that even further because we were able to clone one of those original 11 that we couldn't breed beforehand. So now we've got even more genetics coming into that situation. I don't think we've bred the clone yet, but we have made her. She is alive and doing okay, last I was told.
So from all of that, we also have captive collection information that we're able to use to respond to animals in the wild. So manatees, for instance, are some of the most iconic animals that we've got in the States, but people don't typically realize when there's a cold snap, an oil spill, a boat strike, aquariums and zoos are typically the facilities that are responding to those emergencies. We will rehabilitate those manatees and then put them back out into the wild because those are the spaces that know the water quality, the diet, and what we might need to do medically. This upper picture here is a flamingo. He's not wearing cute boots. That's actually salt around his legs. In 2019, South Africa had a massive drought. And when all of the adult flamingos left because their food sources dried up, we had thousands of flamingo chicks that were stranded. They don't turn pink until later. But zoos and aquariums did a call internationally, and avian specialists, veterinarians, and nutritionists were able to come to South Africa. We've been hand-rearing flamingos for decades. We know what they need to eat. We know how to raise them together. Full disclosure, flamingos are some of the dumbest things that I've ever worked with, which is great for this situation because all we needed to do was to get them to a juvenile state and then show them an adult flamingo, and they were like, got it, that's what I'm working with. So they don't imprint very well. So that was an example of the entire aviculture industry essentially being able to fly down to South Africa to rear up these animals and stop that mortality rate for that year. The bottom photo here is one of the koalas from the Australia wildfires in 2020. Veterinarians from Australia and New Zealand were the primary ones building those field hospitals for the animals because we know how to treat them from what we're working with in zoos and aquariums. So sometimes when we have these natural disasters or man-made problems, the zoo professionals are able to leave their facilities and we can take our expertise to where it's most needed. Now we're gonna get into the actual stuff that Ish and I do. Animal keepers, we don't have typical days. So we do daily health checks, medications, feeds, we're cleaning. But we might be doing things like swimming in a pool to pick up trash, clean windows. I might be scuba diving to go and grab an animal. We might be training. Ish is gonna talk a little bit more about how we use animal training for the animals to work with us for their own health a bit later. We'll also do the classic things of behavior monitoring, breeding, training, enrichment, which you guys will hear more about as well. All of that is before we get to the things like we're doing here with you today, which we consider to be one of our favorite things to do, which is talk to folks about how we're saving the animals and what we do.
So it may come a surprise to you that animals eat and poop every day. And if you don't think so, I suggest you invite some friends over, turn off your toilet, and see how well that goes. And so because of this, we are at work every day. We do have weird schedules, as we often call it, because even on Saturday and Sunday, someone is there taking care of the animals because they didn't stop just because it's the weekend. And so we always have to be there. My schedule just pretty soon is actually about to change so that my weekend will be Tuesday and Wednesday. And everybody else has different days on my entire team. We don't never have everybody off on the same day because then animals have nothing to do. That also includes holidays. So right here is actually a picture of me with one of our red pandas. Her name was Scarlet. And this was taken on Thanksgiving. This was my Thanksgiving. I made sure that she had a bamboo feast in front of her. And so we're also there on Christmas, New Year's, any holiday you can think of, we are there. We are working every single day to make sure that these animals are doing okay. And just like the mailman, we are there through rain, sleet, and snow. This was a picture I took of my coworker out at our Front Royal facility, especially anyone who's been out to Front Royal, you may know that it is very mountainous, and mountains do mean lots and lots of snow. So we did have to go out to all of our facilities, even when it's in deep snow. And we also had to dig out our own ways to get to the animals. That facility is so large that you may have seen that on the map earlier. There's that central campus. But after that, we have to get into pickup trucks to go out to all of the sites that we're working with our animals. So this is basically Chris here digging a route for his pickup truck so that we can actually get to the animals and make sure that they're fed and cleaned and everything.
So my specific exhibit, I don't know if you want to click it to see if those monkeys will move. Great, thank you, monkeys. So we have 147 species just within my building. It's multi-story. I have a rainforest area. Ish was just talking about snow. That doesn't apply to me anymore. I get to be inside, my pools are 80 degrees, I have a great time. And we have the most diverse building in the park, which means that my team is working with all of these different taxa and we're responding to all of their health needs.
All right, so my unit is mainly called Lions, Tigers, and Bears. Thank you. And mine is made of mostly, not mostly, entirely mammals. While my unit does not have nearly as many different types of animals as Hillary does, mine is a lot larger because my animals are a lot larger. We take up a lot more space. So as you can see, we basically have our big cats, our Andean bears. Hold on, I'll point to them here. Right down here, you can see on the left here, and I'll go over here. Our Andean bears, we have our lions here. We also have tigers, bobcats, Pallas cats, which if you don't know of Pallas cats, they're actually a very, very secretive animals. So it's very unusual to see them at zoos, but ours are great about staying on exhibit. So if you come, make sure you see Pallas cats, and then anytime you talk to a cat person, you can tell them you saw a Pallas cat, and they'll get so jealous. And then we also have our binturongs, our prairie dogs, and our new Canada lynx, as well as our bat-eared foxes. Out at our Front Royal facility, I was working mostly with maned wolves. That is, as in a lion's mane, not the state. And as you can see, here's one of our guys with his little mane there in one of his yards. And then we also had, in this same area, we have these little boxes here. This is basically the inside for that maned wolf. Don't worry, it's plenty of space for him. He spends most of his time out of the box. But then behind that box, you can see the yard that he's in. Basically, what we're looking at is the side of that box that I would go into to do all kinds of cleaning and changing out his food, things like that. And the other side of that is his yard where he would come into. And so for each of those wolves in that area, Each of those yards is probably about an acre. And then for that one area, there were 13 of them. And that was one of our 3 maned wolf areas. That facility is huge. We also had red pandas. This is Xena here helping me to open the door one day. And these guys don't need nearly as much space, but we do plenty of breeding with them to make sure that because we're also helping with that population as well. As I was saying, we do have a lot of space out at our Front Royal facility. And so while we do a lot of research, which is especially helpful because the public can't have access, so we don't have to worry about the animals being too scared or anything like that. We also have lots and lots of space for especially large animals. Basically deer, horses, giraffes, things like that. Those are what we call hoof stock. And as you can imagine, hoof stock are quite large. So basically a lot of space is really good for hoof stock. Right here we have a picture of a scimitar horned oryx baby or calf. And she is doing exactly what she is supposed to be doing, which is basically when they have babies, the moms, if there are predators around, mom can't exactly pick up the baby and leave because all of her appendages are being busy carrying her away. But she also can't really fight off a lion or something like that. She's basically just a deer or an oryx in this situation. So what the babies do is they just sit somewhere, they stay very still, and they stay very quiet. I'm sure all the parents in this room are very jealous right now. And so then mom basically just walks away from the baby and pretends it's not there. And that way, if a lion is looking around, they don't see some tasty looking baby that they could eat. They just think nothing's there, nothing's going on. This baby in particular, there were 2 of us, and it took us an hour to find her in this yard. She was doing a very good job. We also do some hand rearing out there. This is me with a baby red panda. Sometimes if, as Hillary referred to earlier with hand rearing, basically that's oftentimes if something goes on where mom just can't quite raise their baby for for some reason or another, we end up doing what we call hand rearing, which is basically we are the ones raising the baby. So that includes keeping them warm, feedings, so many feedings. I'm sure the parents aren't jealous of that part. And just constantly making sure that they're okay. And this is actually me out at Memphis with a baby monkey that we were hand rearing for a little while. Her name was Phoenix. And she liked to take selfies.
We will also hand rear on a smaller scale, depending upon what's going on. So this is just a very small scope of some of the stuff that my unit might do. On the far left, there are eggs from some of our catfish on those leaves. About 4 days later, they hatched out as fry, which is in the middle. And then the far right picture is about 16 days into that. They all got to be over 2 inches. And at that point, we were talking to aquariums that wanted to have some of our offspring. And then what happens is, for fish, I put them in the mail. And we shipped them to that zoo. And it was fine. And then for some other species, it may, like Ish was saying, be more of an emergency response. So here on the left, you have a flamingo egg that is hatching. That little white dot in the middle is what's called an egg tooth that birds will use to break out of that egg from the inside. And then, like I said, with the wild flamingos, all we had to do once those chicks were big was to make sure that they were safely able to navigate the exhibit, which we did do via a swim test. You'll see us standing in the pool with them to make sure that they can manage their way up and about, but flamingo do swim. You don't see it for the most part, but this was us making sure that they knew what they were doing before they went back out into the exhibit so that they could meet the new flamingos and learn how to be birds rather than people. They did pass that swim test. They did a very good job. And then on the far right is a bird called an elegant crested tinamou. For the ladies in the room, they are part of the ratite group, and one of the things that that group is famous for is the males do all of the parenting. They sit on those eggs, they take care of those chicks, and the female is like, bye, I'm not doing anything. Now, the challenge that we had is our male got sick while he was incubating those eggs. So we pulled the eggs and we hatched them in an incubator. Now, what we found out later was that one of them had a wonky leg that was splaying a bit. So we devised a way to put him into paper towel rolls so that his legs would then train to sit under him so he could have a normal gait as he was walking. So sometimes when we do those hand rearing, there are new challenges that we have to overcome. And we were thrilled that in this case, it was just a paper towel roll that was what we were going to use.
All right, so next up we have enrichment, as Hillary talked about earlier that we would be getting to. We're getting to it now. Enrichment, because mental health is important too. So as I'm sure you're all assuming, we certainly do veterinary care to make sure that the animals are physically healthy. And so then we also have to do other things to make sure that they're mentally healthy. And that's where enrichment comes in. Normally in the wild, animals would basically be walking around, experiencing new things, seeing new things, smelling new things, hearing new things. And that's basically would keep them mentally stimulated, making sure that they're doing okay. But if we're in a zoo, say, for instance, we can't exactly take the lion out to go experience new things. So we have to bring new to him. So right here we have basically what we call a puzzle feeder that I made. This was back when I was working in Memphis with giant pandas. And when you work with giant pandas, there's plenty of bamboo around. So basically I drilled some holes into this piece of bamboo, and then I actually put bugs inside. Then I gave it to some monkeys, and they had to figure out how to get the bugs out. They were very interested in getting the bugs out. Next up, we have our clouded leopard Ariel here, and she's eating an ice cake that I made for her. This is for International Leopard Day. And basically, I pretty much just mixed some blood and some chicken broth into some water and then froze it. And then basically, I was able to kind of stick things together and make her a little cake. Right here we have our tiger Demai, showing us that cats are cats, and if she fits, she sits. She loves to sit in her tub whenever we give it to her, so she always has a good time with that. And then on the bottom here is our male giant panda that I worked with in Memphis. His name was Lulla, and he has his sheet right there. Lulla, when he was especially in a kind of sleepy mood, would get very playful with us. And we found that if we put a sheet in with him that we could still hold while we were standing in the back, you can kind of see there's that mesh back there. We could stand back there and we could hold on to part of the sheet and he would hold the other end, and he liked to play tug of war with us. He actually liked it so much that if we then just let the sheet go and let him take the whole thing, he'd bring it back. But enrichment is also good for people as well, and so sometimes we do a little bit of what we call human enrichment. This was actually on another Thanksgiving. My coworker had taken some biscuits that were for our monkeys and mixed them with some water so that she could basically turn them into some almost a clay-like substance, and she made a turkey. The monkeys had a good time and even enjoyed their vegetable stuffing. Up here we have one of our maned wolves again. He has what we call a jolly egg. This same company makes balls that are very, very durable, and the animals can play with them. For some strange reason, they don't care about the balls very much, but they love the eggs. I don't know why. And enrichment is also good for babies too. This is that baby red panda that we saw earlier, and we basically gave her a friend, so she's just sleeping with her friend there. And we also like to celebrate birthdays and use those for enrichment as well. So for one of our lions recently, her name is Shira. She just turned 21, which I believe we did we put it into a age tester kind of thing for cats, and that's about 94 in cat years. So she's up there and she's still going. And so our commissary made her a cake. They do a lot better job than I do. And so this one also has plenty of blood and chicken broth and things like that are all frozen inside of there. I think there was even a bone that she had a good time as well with too. Another form of enrichment that we do actually is training, because learning new skills is also great for mental stimulation. So in this picture here, you can see we were basically training a monkey. Sorry, it's a little difficult to see through the bars there. But we were training her to voluntarily go inside of a crate. Once they go into the crate, we can easily move them around. If we need to move them to a different exhibit or we do medical procedures, all kinds of things like that, that usually works out for crate training pretty well. And with this one in particular, before I got there, she wasn't trained to go into the crate. They'd actually kind of scared her into it with some nets. But I decided to try to take that on, and I was able to train her to voluntarily go inside of this crate. And so she did it very quickly. I trained her in a week. We can also train them for some more fun activities. Right here is our giant panda, where she was learning to paint. So she basically learned that she puts her hand up and then down, up and then down. So that way we can get her hand up, we put in some paint, she puts her hand down into the paint, picks it back up, we switch the paint out for a canvas, she puts her hand down onto the canvas, and now your panda is painting. Some of our training behaviors are also for more technical and medical reasons. This is Shira, our 21-year-old lady there. And she, being an older cat, she had the issue that a lot of older cats, which is her kidneys are starting to slow down on her. And so, as I'm sure everyone knows, when your kidneys are slowing down on you, drink lots and lots of water. But how do you tell a lion to drink more water? So what we came up with is that we basically take a little bit of blood and mix it in with lots and lots of water, and she thinks it's delicious. So we can just fill these little bottles up here, squirt that in, and she just licks it right up, no problem. Down there is our giant panda, Lala, again, and he is doing what we call target training. Lala has basically been trained so that he touches his nose to the end of that target in my hand there. And so that way I can have him move around wherever I need him to go. Since these guys are bears, they are very, very powerful, very fast when they want to be. And so we do not go in with them. So in that case, if I need him to move in a certain direction, maybe I need to see the side of his face or the other side of his face, I can move the target around and he will move wherever I need him to go. And then up here we have our red panda who is getting an ultrasound. She's basically been trained to just kind of stand up on her hind legs and hold on there while I give her treats. And our vet, Christy, there is actually doing an ultrasound because she was pregnant. All right, so now next up, we're going into moving large animals around. As you may have guessed, it's not super easy to move a lion or a tiger around, especially when we're going to other facilities, mainly for, as Hillary was talking about earlier, breeding for our species survival programs and things like that. So we have to start with usually start with a very large crate. As you can see, the crate's kind of set up here, and we can set it up onto the chute there so that they can basically walk in just like they would anywhere else. And then we have this very large door that we set up with a pulley system so we can drop that. And then we train them to walk inside of the crate, just like that monkey earlier. And then these crates are very heavy, even when they're empty. So we actually have to use a pallet jack to move them around. And then our carpenter people made what we call skates. So we can basically put the crate down onto these skates. Now it's on wheels, and we can move it around wherever we need to go. And it's always very important when you send your animal out to another zoo in your very expensive crate to get your crate back. So for those who can't really see it very well, we have property of the National Zoo kind of embossed into the crate right there. And then after that, they're ready to go on their adventure. We do have to get a forklift in so that we can basically pick up that crate, and then it gets put onto a special van that is designed to actually hold onto that crate. And these days, we've usually been working with a company where an animal care professional and a veterinarian take them with them. But then, so there's also times when we're doing vet procedures, and so we have to move the animals short distances, but we're not taking them somewhere where they're fully awake and aware. So in that case, we basically have to knock them out because we do not go in or even touch our lions or tigers if they are fully awake and aware. So the first thing we do is we've trained them so that we can give them an injection, and that knocks them out. And as you can see in that lower picture there, we have one of our lions is knocked out, and then that tarp right next to him is what we will then roll him over onto. As you can see, there are lots and lots of handles on that tarp because we need lots and lots of people to pick up a heavy lion. After that, we have a gurney that actually raises and lowers on hydraulics so that we can lower it down as low as it'll go, lift him onto the gurney, and then we can lift him up the gurney lifts him up, and we can wheel him out into our ambulance. We actually do have our own ambulance. And that ambulance is actually specially set up with the gurney so that we just hook it right onto the gurney, or hook the gurney onto the ambulance, and then the wheels pick themselves up underneath, and the whole thing just slides right in. And we didn't have to do that much lifting of a 400-pound lion. But as I said earlier, we don't touch them unless they are fully awake and aware. And so because of that, when they are knocked out, we do have to take advantage. And we take lots of advantage. This was during one of our lions' dental procedures. So those are the very few times that we are allowed to touch the animals.
Okay, so my exhibit has a lot of fish. We also have aquatic reptiles and amphibians in the park. And sometimes people want to know, how are we taking care of them? Similar to what Ish was talking about, we will use anesthesia, but we'll use a different chemical. We won't use isoflurane. We use something called MS-222. And then on this bottom left picture, we have 2 tanks at the bottom of that cart. That works very similar to an isoflurane. One of them is full of anesthesia. The other one is full of fresh water, and we can manipulate that percentage the same way that we would with a gas. In the second left, that's one of our red-bellied piranhas who's under anesthesia. We just have that water flowing over his gills so that he stays knocked out. And if we need them to be in certain positions, we'll just wedge them up with little sponge bricks. Or if it's a bigger fish like the stingray here, we will climb into the space with them to hold them. And you can see on the far right, we're doing an ultrasound of that female to see the state of her ovaries. That particular individual was about 18 when we did that exam. So we were just making sure all of her reproductive things were going well. It's of a particular concern with stingrays that we keep an eye on that for the females.
So, of course, with big cats, safety is very, very important, and our safety usually starts with knowing where the cats are. So as you can see, we have this map of the building where you can see where everything is, and then we have these little magnetic labels or name tags, so we can move those around to show where everybody is so everyone knows what's going on. And then, of course, we have our big, heavy doors to keep everything in place, make sure that everyone is staying safe, and they are very helpful because these guys do take advantage. This is our boy Midas. He liked to be very nosy sometimes and look into those windows. So as you can see, our yards here are actually shaped like triangles, and each of those yards has 2 doors at either end, kind of on the legs of the triangle there. So because of that, you can't see the other door whenever you're working at one end or the other. And so we made sure that we didn't want anyone accidentally shifting a cat onto anybody else. And so one of the things that we have is these little lights that are on top of the door there. This is a much closer view. And basically, if both doors are closed, both lights are off. And if one door is open, both lights are on. That way, nobody is working at one end of the building and then accidentally moving a cat into a yard or anything like that while somebody else had a door open at the other end, and we don't have to worry about cats getting out to anybody. We do also make sure to have safety precautions around the building, so we do keep things like pepper spray and tourniquets available just in case, but we don't usually have to use them. And then, of course, one of the big safety things are locks. We make sure that we mainly are making sure that we're doing things with systems, because if you have a building full of locks, but also a building full of people with keys, then those locks aren't super helpful. So in this case, we actually have our 2-lock, 2-key system. So as you can see, we have a purple lock and a purple key, as well as a brown lock and a brown key. So basically, the way that we work that is if I want to move into an animal that I want to clean up or anything like that an animal was in, I have to lock that down with if I have the brown key, I will lock it down with a brown lock. And then the other keeper will then check to make sure that that area is safe and secure and there are no animals in there, and they will lock it down with a purple lock. then say afterward, I decide I want to open that back up. I can't just open a door without checking and making sure everything is safe. The only way I can open that door afterward is if I get the other keeper to come and open that door with me, because they have the other lock, or they have the other key for the other lock. I can only open one of those locks. Then we have yards that, again, as we showed earlier. And so for those, the animals we can basically have a keeper in that yard. We could have electricians in that yard. We could have exterminators in that yard, all at the same time. And so it's very important to make sure everybody leaves that yard before we're moving anything out there. And so the way we do that is with these colored locks and colored keys. So basically for each person that goes out into the yard, we put another lock on there and we give them the corresponding key. So if our exterminator comes and he's doing work out in the yard, he knows nobody can shift a cat out on him because he has the only key that would let a cat out.
Separate from our regular zoo work, sometimes we are invited to go to our field sites, some of those satellite facilities that I was talking about earlier. In the middle, that's our Coral Propagation Center that's in Hawaii. I also have been able to go to some visiting research sites. So in Miami, I was helping with one of the scientific field boats with shark research. And then on the far right, that is a red knot bird in Delaware Bay that we were working with one of the schools up there. We also have researchers that will come to the zoo and we'll be able to help facilitate some of their work as well. So in addition to hands-on animal work, there is sometimes a heavy scientific component depending upon what that cycle with the research projects is. We're running out of time, so I'm going to flip through some of our case studies real quick. But this is Albert. He's one of our blue-billed curassow. We used what's called an ethogram to gauge his behavior to see how stressed and if he was doing a self-mutilation behavior. We did improve it, so that is his tail feathers at full capacity. He had a problem with pulling them out for a while when he wasn't doing well. We have an electric eel here. Sometimes people want to know how we're doing our electric eel care to stay safe, similar to what Ish was saying. And most of the answer is we all wear these really cool gloves that are insulated, and we'll use a voltometer to measure the animal's output before we start doing anything hands off, or with gloves off, like with this ultrasound. He was not producing a significant amount of electricity in that situation. And then our sloth here at Amazonia, his name's Howie. It's a big space. So what we've done is we've made a big map of the exhibit and we watch and note what trees he's hanging out in so we can get a good idea of where he's spending his time throughout the year. And then just as a bonus, Ish and I get to go to other facilities and touch stuff. So that's where we are with that. But we wanted to make sure that you guys had at least 15 minutes for questions. So we're happy to open the floor.
I think I remember the federal government recently trying to take money away from the Smithsonian. Would you talk about the effect of that on your operations?
I won't know actual numbers, and you are correct. Our budget, we've been told, will not be increasing, which does, in essence, mean that there's going to be a loss in funding. What typically happens is that Congress will allocate funding for the entire Smithsonian institution, and then our Board of Regents will divide that amongst the museums and research centers. The zoo has not heard what the impact to us practically is going to be because we are still in a continuing resolution, so that final budget for the current fiscal year has not been determined yet. But there are some things that we as animal care staff have been told might not be happening, conference attendance for staff, and then there might be some research partnerships where those scientists are pursuing different grant funding to keep those projects going right now because we're just in a stopgap mode.
Okay. Is this on? Yeah, okay. The cattle industry has perfected a highly developed artificial insemination program. They're flying frozen sperm all over the world, probably. And you talked about moving animals from facility, zoo to zoo, for breeding purposes. Is the zoo doing anything with artificial breeding, artificial insemination? I can't imagine, frankly, trying to get sperm from a tiger, but nevertheless, I'm wondering if you're doing any of that.
100%, yes, we are. So the moving the animals around is also part of them being on exhibit, and so people can see them when they're at their new zoos. It's always very exciting. We got a new tiger, that kind of stuff. But we do also do artificial inseminations. I know, especially with I worked on a lot of artificial inseminations with giant pandas because we're really big on them breeding. So we can definitely move just the genetic material around as well. But we do also make sure that we're moving the animals around because we would prefer that a lot of the breeding be more natural and that kind of thing.
Off of that topic, sometimes we'll preserve that sperm as well, so that if the individual animal passes, we might still be able to pass on those genes. So that's part of what the cryopreservation work is with that genetic bank. But we're doing it with a lot of mammals and some birds, but then for other animals, the techniques have not been established, or there hasn't been a call for it depending upon the species.
And also for collecting those materials, we do have methods of knocking the animals out and still getting those materials from them. So you don't have to go in with a cup and a tiger.
Have you ever been bitten?
I have not been bitten by anything in any kind of serious way. I think I've maybe gotten a few nips here and there from things when they just kind of, if I wasn't paying attention and they were mostly like nuzzling at me or anything like that. But I haven't received any injuries from any serious injuries from any animals.
The school answer I give people is that anything with a mouth can bite. So we've all been bitten by stuff, but it's frequently, a bird bite is not going to be as bad as a tiger bite. I have a salamander that bites me every time I go to feed him, but he's not doing anything to me.
Question. This is very, very impressive. The span of the research, the care, the sharing of what you're learning. Are there other centers in the country that are equivalent to the Smithsonian or something close to that? Because this is very vital in terms of preserving species. Thank you.
Yeah, there are some facilities are known for being very, very good at specific species, so they may have the capacity to work with one specific group more than others. Off the top of my head, Detroit Zoo, Shedd Aquarium, San Diego Zoo, the entire Wildlife Conservation Society, which is the New York City zoo system, and then St. Louis Zoo and a facility in Florida called White Oak are kind of the big ones that are doing a lot of this breeding and propagation effort.
But also, as being part of the SSP, we are part of what we call the AZA, or American Association of Zoos and Aquariums. It's mostly in the U.S., but it does go all over the world. And we're basically working with zoos all over the country, all over the world. So even if they're not doing quite as much as the Smithsonian, everybody is still contributing and helping out with the whole situation.
You talked about acclimate or trying to get an animal to interact with his environment. And a predator animal, an important part of his life in the wild is killing and eating part of his environment. So I don't think you want to do that, but how do you deal with that aspect of life?
So for the most part, the Smithsonian does not feed out any live mammals to any of our animals, but we do have one exception, and that actually is those black-footed ferrets I talked about earlier. Because we are training them to go back out into the wild, and they do need to know how to hunt and kill. So those are the one animal in all of our stuff that do get live rats that they do kill. And that is part of them learning how to do it. I have seen them do it. They get much better as they get older and learn how to do it better. But besides that, we do not give out any kind of live animals. But for predatory animals, we mostly give them meat, oftentimes ground meat, but sometimes they may get like frozen and then thawed mice or things like that. And for the most part, the best we can do is just kind of move things around as they get it or something like that. Sometimes with cheetahs even, we use what we call a lure courser, which basically is just kind of maybe like a piece of a bunny pelt or something like that that's on a string. And then there's basically a pulley system that's all set up so that it can move around the whole yard. So that way the cheetah can get its running out and actually going after things. But for the most part, with our predatory animals, that's about the most that we do. We're not giving them anything live.
So when are these animals then released back into the wild, or is it the baby animals that are once they learn how to survive, they go into the wild?
For the species that we're breeding with the intent of putting that back out into the wild, it will be the offspring, not the parent.
I see.
But the majority of our animals are not going to be doing that. They were born in zoos. They're probably going to be in zoos for their whole life. Of the species that's the plan. But we have 600 different species at the Rock Creek or the DC campus, and none of them are going to be re-released into the wild.
I'm just curious. Blood seems to be an important food source. I wonder if you could tell us where the blood comes from.
Pretty much with all of our meaty products, it comes from the butcher. They've got plenty of it around, especially our lions love to get bones, and cow bones are in great supply in the U.S. So they do get basically cow femurs, essentially. And they really like to just chew on those.
You mentioned giant pandas. How are they related to the situation where we're dealing with China owning so many giant pandas? Are these owned by China or are they owned by us?
So almost all of the giant pandas in the world are owned by China. The only exception I know of are the ones that were in Mexico City. They actually did own their own, and I think one of them has since died, so they're down to one. Yep. And so that's basically just all how the Chinese government is running that situation. That way, if any of them breed with each other, then basically the Chinese government owns the parents, and so they also own the babies. A lot of the time, facilities kind of can get a little weird about when animals breed, who owns what. And so, like, there was a group of monkeys that I worked with where who owned which babies would switch back and forth. So one facility owned the facility that owned mom owned the first baby, the facility that owned dad owned the second baby, and then it would switch back and forth like that. And then there are other animals where it can be very odd, like the Memphis Zoo owns all the aardvarks. But so with the giant pandas, we basically just have to work with the Chinese government for all of them. Basically, that situation is all of the giant pandas are on loan. And so for whichever zoo has them, they are basically paying the Chinese government a certain amount of money for each panda every year. Whatever number you're thinking of, it's probably bigger than that.
Thank you.
You mentioned the international programs. Have the current visa policies impacted that?
Yes and no. So we have students or visiting researchers from other countries, and that has been something that has been a challenge, especially as people are pitching new projects. There is concern of being dependent upon foreign researchers and their involvement. That being said, the Smithsonian is considered by most facilities and our own government to be a world-class research institute. So bringing people in, I think, is a little easier for us than it is for some of the, say, universities. I do know for us going out of the country to other countries, that does not seem to be impacted right now based on what I've heard from our research teams going to other parts of the world.
You have a very impressive safety system with double locks and so forth, but has there ever been an incident at the Washington Zoo?
I do believe there was an incident back in the 90s where someone got in and did not come back out. I think that person basically climbed some fences and things like that to be able to get in there. But now we have systems where we have more fencing. We have zoo police that are on grounds 24 hours a day, things like that. So that's really the only major one that I can think of off the top of my head. Other than that, we have been pretty safe. Knock on wood.
The career path that you have chosen and done so well is just marvelous. The stories you've told us. Are the people younger than you who are looking for a career path in zoology coming the way you would like them to? Or is this a popular thing to do as you face the future from graduation?
Yeah, I would say we have a pretty steady interest of people who want to join the field. That being said, the Smithsonian is part of the federal government. We get paid pretty well for what the field standards are. There are facilities in more rural parts of the country where the pay may not be as much, so that may inhibit people from pursuing it as a career. But I would say people come into the field for a lot of different reasons. Ish and I are both what we call species generalists. We like to work with everything. But there are some people that from birth, their passion is, say, elephants. There's only a certain number of places that you can go and do that work. So there's a smaller application, or there's a larger application pool for a smaller number of positions if that's going to be your particular interest. But I do think people are still interested in doing this. Some of my former interns, they may go more of the genetics route or a reproductive science or a veterinary care route, depending upon where they find their passions lie. But we get a pretty good variety of people that are interested depending upon what their own motivations are for the field.
Yeah, I usually like to say for that whole situation, there are a lot of people that are interested in being an animal keeper, and it's kind of like a bank. Every town has a bank, not every town has a zoo. So if a lot of people want to be bank tellers, they can get jobs pretty easily. If a lot of people want to be zookeepers, there just aren't that many of those jobs out there.
You said earlier that you captured a portion of the ferret population out west and that the remaining ones died of Black Plague, and you're reintroducing the ones that you are breeding. How is it that they don't get the Black Plague?
For the most part, as far as we can tell, it's not out in the population right now, so we're not super concerned about that. But we are always monitoring all of the populations that we put out there. We're always watching. So pretty much any black-footed ferret that's gone back out into the wild in the last decade or two, people can tell you exactly when it went out and how it lived its life and when we stopped seeing them. But so for the most part, we're not super concerned about Black Plague anymore. But as we were saying earlier with the kind of ARCs, as we call them, we still have that captive population and we're pretty good at breeding them at this point. So we're not super concerned about the population crashing from that, but we are always watching and making sure. And if it does, we know how to bounce it back.
The Great Plains program that I was mentioning earlier, they're heavily invested in choosing the sites that those ferrets are released into. So it's a wide range through the Midwest and West of the states. Some of it's on tribal land, some of it's on private land that people have donated as habitat, and some of it is on federal property. So those populations may be hundreds, thousands of miles apart from each other. So the risk to individual or the species as a whole is minimized by having those diverse locations that they're living.
Some of it is even going into Canada and Mexico as well.
But you would know by your research with a particular animal whether they were infected by anything like that. Or if do you check for all kinds of infections while they're with you, and then when they're ready to be released, how do you figure all that?
The captive animals go through the same preventative health medicine that you and I might as well. Depending upon the species, there'll be a general exam typically every 3 years. And then for some, if they're geriatric or we're watching something a little bit closer, we might be getting blood samples a little bit more often. We do annual fecal screenings for parasites on all of the animals that we can get samples from. For the animals that are going to be released into the wild, though, I do know that there are some vaccines that we will not give those animals. I'm not 100% on the veterinary medicine behind it, but it does have to do with the natural antibodies that we want them to develop once they go out into that area. Or for some of the animals, West Nile, for instance, hasn't been noted on that island where those birds are getting released, so they're not giving them a West Nile vaccine because they're going to go onto a space where mosquitoes aren't found.
Claire, we certainly need to thank you because you brought us our speakers today. Appreciate that very much. But Hillary and Ishmael, this has been a fascinating time. time here, and you can tell from the audience that we are very much attracted to what you've done. Thank you so much for coming.
May I add one thing, John? There has been one field trip from Goodwin to the zoo, and there will be another. I'm not sure when, but it'll be warmer weather. That much I know.
I'm sorry but John forgot to check for me. At any rate, I'm so impressed with your apparent understanding where everything is and how things are going. I'm wondering about your electronics or your spyware, so that you know all these things about the animals. What kind of technology do you use?
So for most of the animals, they're basically kept in areas small enough that we can watch them pretty closely. We don't have too many issues with that. But we do also have plenty of cameras, especially like I know in the Big Cat building, pretty much every single one of those dens has a camera watching what's going on in there all the time. And they can pick up audio, they can pick up video. We also have some of the pan, tilt, zoom ones, so we can even zoom in on them very closely. And so for a lot of, that's usually how, if we're watching something very, very closely, we will set up cameras. But for the most part, they're kept in a small enough area that we can see them and monitor them just fine.
For some of the bigger animals, I know if it's a big scale program, if we're doing research on like a wild population, some of those researchers might attach radio collars, so they're able to track them via satellite. So if it's something that's a big migratory species, the Migratory Bird Center, I say collars, I shouldn't have, they're teeny tiny backpacks that they put on the back of birds, and we were able to see where they might be going on that migratory pathway. We don't currently work with this species, but I, as a nerd, was very excited to hear that they've managed to put tiny trackers on monarch butterflies to track that migration recently. So as technology evolves, we're going to keep figuring out ways to use it.
Thank you for having us, and if you have any other questions or anything, we'll be around for a few more minutes.